Akadosh Boker Tov, Masechet Ketubot Daf Lamed Amud Aleph 30a1. Says the Gemara, Hanicha le Rabbi Yeshivav. I understand according to Rabbi Yeshivav, right? Why? Ila puka mitama Rabbi Simai kaati. If you're going to tell me that he's coming to exclude from this the reasoning of the Simai, Shapi, that makes sense. Why? Rabbi Yeshivav said in the name of Rabbi Akiva that any time that there's no biat Israel, which means that a Jew cannot get married to them, so the child is going to be a mamzer. So therefore, it comes and gives a general rule. Anytime that there's a forbidden marriage, the child is a mamzer. Even when there's no isur, ela ba'aseh, only in on aseh. So he comes and he says, velo ba'alelotzi. So it's coming to exclude Rabbi Simai that he says in Shitat Rabbi Akiva that almanak tukan gadol, it's not going to be a mamzer. So he comes and he says, according to Rabbi Yeshivav, he's going to say any chayve lavim, the child is going to be a mamzer. But chayve aseh, no. Okay? That's why this is the Shita of Rabbi Akiva, by the way, that any child which comes out of a forbidden marriage, doesn't matter how it is, the child is a mamzera. But if you're going to tell me now that he's saying his own concept, that it's going to be a mamzer, and even positive commandments, maybe now what's the difference between them? So he says, the difference between them is going to be a be'ula to a Kohen Gadol, which means that what happens if a Kohen Gadol comes and he was a nas, he violated a na'ara pnuya, that she already had relations before. So now she's asura to him because she's not a betula. So that's called alav haba mikla laseh, because it says vehu isha bivtula yikach. He has to take a betula. So therefore, kim betula me'amav yikach isha. So ma'ishna, what's the difference there? Because it's a positive commandment that's not equal to everybody. Meaning, nobody else has to have this mitzvah that he has to get married to a virgin. It's only the Kohen Gadol, right? So therefore, for him, that's called an aseh, which is not shaveh bakol. It's not shaveh for everybody. It's only for him. He's the only one in the world that has this obligation. Okay? So
maybe a Kohen Gadol should not be violated.
So says it one more time. So basically, he comes and he says, Amar Rav Chasta, says Rav Chasta, Kol modim beval nida shemeshalem knas. Everybody agrees. Whether Shimon Atimni, Rabbi Shimon ben Asiya, everybody agrees. If somebody violates a nida, he has to come and he has to pay knas. Leman damar, because according to Leman damar, yesh ba'avaya, hanam yesh ba'avaya. What? A person can get married with somebody that has a nida during the time that she's a nida, but according to the Leman damar, because at the end of the day, she could also stay married. Meaning right now she's a nida, but she's not a nida all her life. Afterwards, she'll become clean. So therefore, he could still stay married to her. So according to everybody, somebody that violates a nida, he has to pay the knas. But this comes to exclude the time was learned in the Braita. There's a Tosefta. Do you know that Rabbi Nachum ben Kaneh, he used to make Kippur to like Shabbat to do tashlumim? What does that mean? Just like Shabbat, amitchayev minafsho patur min tashlumim. If somebody comes on Shabbat and they destroyed something, they made a fire. Now at the time of the fire destroyed things. Plus, he made a fire. So since it both came at the same time, he has a chiyuv mitah. He was mechalel Shabbat. Plus, he has to pay for the damage. He doesn't pay for the damages. Why? We give him the most stringent punishment, and then that's it. And then he's exempt from the lighter punishment, from paying back. So he says, Yom Kippurim mitchayev benafsho patur min tashlumim. So to Kippur, he's going to be chayav karet, and he doesn't have to pay money.
Karet, lo mitah.
Yeah. Karet and not tashlumim. He doesn't have to pay. Okay? My tama, what's the reasoning of Rabbi Yochanan ben Akana? Rabbi says, Ne'emar ason bidei adam, ne'emar ason bidei shamayim. It says ason also by bidei adam and also bidei shamayim. It says, right, velo ye ason, right? Ason is like a disaster, right? A terrible thing that's going to happen. So there we're talking about, right, bidei adam, mitat beddin. And it says ason, ukrau ason, by bidei shamayim. Because basically what happened was that by Binyamin, when he was going with his brothers, they said, be careful that there's nothing, a disaster that's going to happen to him. There, it was Bidei Shamayim. So if we say, Maha Ason Amur Bidei Adam Patur, just like by the Ason, Mitat Beddin, he's Patur from Tashlumin. So to the Ason, which is by Bidei Shamayim, he's going to be Patur from Tashlumin. So says the Gemara, Matkif La Ravada comes and he asks the question, right? How do you know that Yaakov Avinu was coming and saying that the Ason was on Tsanim Upachim Dividei Shamayim? How do you know they were talking about Tsanim Upachim? Tsanim Upachim is like the cold and the hot. Meaning if a person gets a cold or he gets a fever or things like that, which is Bidei Adam. Dilma al Alya Beganaved Bidei Adam, maybe he's talking about on lions or on Ganavim, that it's also Bidei Adam. Meaning, what did we just do? We just made a gzera shava that ason. Ason, it's written by Bidei Adam, and it's written ason bidei shamayim. So we connected both of them together, just like the ason bidei shamayim, right? That comes from bidei Adam, that comes from a human being. Meaning that when betin come and they give the death penalty, you don't have to pay money. So if it comes to bidei shamayim, you don't have to pay money, right? Which is karet, comes from shamayim. So he says, 1 second. What about, how do you know that Yaakov Avinu was not coming and saying about, we're talking about lions and thieves, which is bidei Adam also. So it says the Gemara, Atu Yaakov aha azahar ve'ahalu azar. He's only coming and he's warning on one thing and on the other one. Yaakov al kol milei azar. Yaakov was coming and warning on everything, but whether it's bidei Adam or whether bidei Shamayim. So it says the Gemara, the tzinim upachim bidei Shamayim. You're going to tell me tzinim upachim kor v'chom. It comes from bidei Shamayim. That means the hot and the cold. It comes from Shamayim. V'atani, we learned it in the Braita. Hakol bidei Shamayim. Chutz tzinim upachim. Everything comes from Shamayim except for tzinim upachim. Shneimar. Tzinim pachim b'derech yikesh, shomen avsho yirchak mehem. Right? V'tu, and furthermore, Ariyah v'ganaveh b'dei Adam ninu. Ariyah v'ganaveh are b'dei Adam, it's not b'dei Shamayim. Right? V'amar Rav Yosef v'chen tana Rav Chia miyon shechal bet hamidash. Av al pi shebatlu sanedinam, b'mito lo batlu. Listen carefully. Do you know that nowadays we don't have arba mito beti? Sekila, srefa, herev, v'chen. We don't have arba mito beti. But even though arba mito betin batlu, the din of arba mito betin is still here. If a person falls off a roof, what is that? Sekila. If he gets bitten by it, what is that? Each one of the laws still apply. We cannot give the death penalty, but it's still there. So therefore, what are you telling me now? That one's bidei shamayim. First of all, when we're talking about tzinim pachim, right? That's not bidei shamayim. That's bidei Adam. Second of all, right? The ariyeh v'ganaveh is not bidei Adam. It's bidei shamayim. Because if Hashem sent a lion, it means that he was chayav one of the arba mito betin, and the lion finished them off. So it answers the Gemara, lo batlu, ha-batlu. What batel the arba mito betin? Ela, but rather lamed amubet 30b. Din arba mito betin lo batlu. The judgment of the arba mito betin lo batlu, which means we still have it. Yeah. So it comes over here and it says, right. So here, for example, here Tosafot come and they say that sometimes you see people that they're over and they die on their deathbeds without any of the arba mito betin because they did teshuvah. So since they did teshuvah, that's why they don't get the arba mito betin. But technically speaking, there was arba mito betin. Yeah. So he comes and he says, right, what happens then? So meaning chayev skila o nofel min hagag o chayav drosto. It says over here like this: if a person is going to be chayav sekila, he falls off the roof and he's going to die, or a wild animal will come and take him down, and they'll trample upon him, just like sekila. Mishin chayav b'srefa, something that's chayav srefa, which is the burning. Remember the lead going down the thread. O nofel bedleka, he's going to burn in a fire. O nachash makisho, or a serpent will come and bite him. Mishin chayav hariga, something that's going to be chayav hariga, which is being killed by the sword. Onim salam malchut is going to be killed by the sword, by the malchut given to the kingdom. Or they're going to come and the thieves will come and they'll kill him. Something that's going to be chayav strangulation. Or tovea banahar, or he's going to drown in the river. Or met besrunki, or he's going to be dying through. It's a type of like okay, if you want to call it COVID, it's chaneket. It's a machala that closes off the throat that he can't breathe until he starts. Okay. So he says that basically that he can't breathe. Yeah. So says the Gemara, Ela Eipu. You're right. You have to switch it around. What do you mean switch it around? The lion and thieves come from Shamayim. Tzinim pachim, and the cold and the hot, meaning a fever or a cold, that comes from bidei Adam. We had to switch it because you're right. We said the exact opposite before. Okay. Next, Rava comes and he says, the reason he says that if somebody gets karet, he's patur from paying back, is me'achar from another pasuk. It says in a pasuk, imagine a person is going to close his eyes from the person that gives his children to the melech, to the molech. Remember, the molech was like the avodah zarah. So he's giving his children to the avodah zarah to kill them. I'm going to put my face on that person in his family. I'm going to cut them off. The Torah says, my karet is like your mita. What does that mean? Just like the mita of you guys is patur min tashlumin, so to my karet is patur min tashlumin. So says the Gemara, okay, fine. Both of them hold in shitat. That if you're going to be chayav karet, you're patur min tashlumin. So what's the difference between the reasonings, where you learn it from, whether it's Rava or Abaye? Abaye went and he learned it from the Pasuk Ason. Here he's learning it from Bima Alem Yalimu. What's the difference between them? Ma'ika ben Rava Abaye. Ikabenai hu zar shachal truma. What happens if you have a zar, a stranger that eats truma of a kohen? Now, if you realize when he eats truma of a kohen, what happens? He's chayav mita bidei shamayim because he ate truma, plus, right? He has to pay back, but he just ate somebody else's food. That food belonged to a kohen. He went to the kohen, he ate his food, so he has to pay back the kohen, but he's chayav mita bidei shamayim. Mita bidei shamayim is not karet; it's less.
To a goy.
Here it's mita b'dei shamayim. Mita b'dei shamayim is not karet. So according to Abaye, that he says it's ason, he's going to be patur, right? Why? That means even mita b'dei shamayim, it's lav davka karet. Mita b'dei shamayim is almost like karet. It's also death from heaven. It's a little bit lower category than karet, but it's also a death. So it's an ason. But according to Rava, it's only the karet is like mita, right? Then he's going to be chayav to pay back. Right? Why is he chayav? That means he's going to get mita b'dei shamayim, plus he has to pay back the food to the kohen. Okay? According to Abaye, he's going to be patur. Says that gonev chelbo shel chavro v'achalo shu chayav. If somebody is going to steal, right, the chelev. Remember, chelev is the prohibited fats. Okay, there's shuman, which is the permitted fats, and the chelev is prohibited fats of an animal. If he steals the prohibited fats of an animal and he eats it, he's going to be chayav to pay back, even though he gets karet for eating chelev. Kvar nitchayav b'geneva, because he was already chayav in the geneva before he was chayav in the isur of chelev. Which means, when do we say kim lev d'Rabba mineh? When both come at the same time. Meaning like this: if somebody steals, when is he chayav for the stealing? The second that he stole. When is he chayav on the mita b'dei shamayim or the karet? When he eats it. So therefore, it didn't come at the same time. So since it didn't come at the same time, he was already chayav on the geneva first, and only afterwards was he chayav on the eating. So therefore, he's chayav on both of them. If he did it both at the same time, which means that it was, let's say, here in a public property, and then he ate it. So when he ate it, he was chayav on the stealing and the eating at the exact same time. Then he's patur. Why? Because it comes at the same time. So here it says, Almas, you see from here, the second he picked it up, he already acquired it. Okay? So mitchayev b'nafsho lo avad de'achile. He says, but he's not going to be mitchayev b'nafsho until he actually eats it. Hachanam, so to here, the second he picked it up, he acquires it. But he's not going to be mechayev b'nafsho until he actually eats it. And here, what we're dealing with, somebody else put it in his mouth. So since he didn't acquire it until it was already in his mouth and he ate it. What does that mean? If I'm going to come pick it up and I put it in his mouth, so maybe I did the stealing. He didn't do any stealing. When does he do the stealing? When he already ate it. When he already ate it, the stealing and the isur, right, which was whether it's karet or mita b'dei shamayim. Remember, truma, mita b'dei shamayim, chelev is karet, dam is karet, right? So those things was at the exact same moment. Okay, so says the Gemara. Yes, because the second that a person eats it, that's it.
He made the one sentence, which is
he only gets one because it was at the same time. But if it was at two separate times, he would get two. So says the Gemara, sof given the last kanya 1 second, but he chewed it. If he chewed it, he already acquired it, and that he's going to be chayav before the swallowing. When is he chayav on the swallowing? He's chayav on the eating. If a person put chelev in their mouth and they chewed it, pig in their mouth and they chewed it, he still doesn't get it, the Avirah, until he actually swallows it. The bliya is the Yisur. Okay, but not the actual Gemara. He says, the second that he chewed it, he acquired it. So but he's only going to be chayav the karet or mita b'dei shamayim once he swallows it. And so the Gemara, no, he swallowed it without chewing it. And he put it down his throat. So says the Gemara, what's the case? If he put it down and he could take it down yadar, so just take it down, take it out, right? Why? Because you take it out. And if you can't give it back, meaning like this, if he put it already, can he take it out and still give it back? So give it back. And if he cannot, so then why is he going to be chayav? He's honest, right? He's patur. If somebody comes and he shoves something down your throat, you're going to be chayav for that? Obviously not. So says no, you could take it out right? Which means you could take it out and still give it back to the guy to eat it, but he didn't want to do that, right? So he says over here, Papa comes and he says, he put him in drinkings, right? He gave him a drink. So since it's a mashkin, the second it goes in this person's mouth, that's it. It's going to become disgusting. Nobody else is ever going to touch it, and therefore he says he's not going to be chayav tashlumin unless it's going to be the how do you call it? The swallowing it. So it comes out that the chiyuv of tashlumin and mitah b'deshamayim come at the same time, and therefore you say kim lim drama mineh. Rashi says b'zar shachal truma mishelo. He's eating his own truma. The karash shirayin shel chavero. So he's eating his own truma. So there's no tashlumin, but he tore at the same time somebody else's clothing. So that's where the tashlumin is going to come into, and then we'll continue with Hashem tonight.